So, couple things I want to remind people of. Not a lot of going on in the WordPress space. Just there's a new beta coming out, but it's just in beta mode, I believe. And I think they're talking about, where is it? Where'd it go? It's yeah, 5.8, but it's in beta mode. So we're not gonna see anything come out until July next month, but more stuff happening with Gutenberg in that regard, a lot more functionality that I'm seeing here. One thing is that next month, July, we are having a welcome back networking in person. Woohoo, finally. So this is going to be at the Fort Bend Chamber of Commerce in Sugar Land. And again, there's no speaker. We're just everybody's going to get together. It's going to be more like a help desk type of networking. So bring your laptop. I'll bring some drinks and maybe some tidbits of food, but this is just to get everyone back together again and just kind of shake. Well, we'll fist bump and do, I think that's the new thing now. I don't think we shake hands anymore, right? But it's just to kind of gear up. It's another way of determining if the community is ready to have WordCamp, where we've fallen off the wagon on that for obvious reasons. And we're just trying to see if we can get the community back together so we can see if WordCamp is a thing that we should kind of get back on track on. If we do WordCamp, it'll probably just be like a one-day thing. Again, keep it small. We've been apart for so long and everybody's kind of gone off on their own thing. So I'm hoping this one, and this will be July 7th. It's in the meetup right now. So please RSVP, let us know if you're going to come, and be legit about RSVPing. Like, don't RSVP and then, and then have people show up. Just try and be, hey, I'm really going to go, and try and make an effort to come. So love to see everybody there. I'm going to try and get all the developers along and see if we can get some other agencies there and do a little bit more help desk type networking. But really, it's just to kind of see everybody again. But other than that, does anyone else have any news they want to share in the WordPress space or even marketing space? Feel free to say something. Open channel. Say what you want. No? All right. Okay. Well, let me, so Amber, I don't really have a good intro for you because I was thinking Road Warrior Creative. Why don't you introduce yourself? I know Amber because she's started in with Mavericks. I'm one of the coaches at Digital Mavericks, and she joined and we hooked up that way. But I think your partner messaged me on LinkedIn and was like, yeah, a couple times, I want to talk to you about accessibility. And I went, well, I want to talk to you too. And so we got hooked up to have you guys come out, or just one of you guys to come out and do this. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about the direction that your company is taking and your plugin.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the CEO of Equalize Digital. We're a certified B Corporation and a WordPress VIP partner. And we do accessibility first perspective of website design and development. But we are increasingly doing a lot more on the accessibility consulting and remediation side of WordPress websites. And it's sort of my passion, making websites work for everyone. So I am also, I'll share a link later, but I'm super excited. We got approved to do one of the first 2 topic-based WordPress meetups. So it'll be permanently virtual. And so there's going to be a WordPress accessibility meetup that's going to be happening regularly twice a month. So if you're interested in learning more, I'll have a link for that towards the end. So, but I don't feel like I need to talk too much about myself. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I'm also happy to just dive in. I don't know if you want to do you normally do introductions all the way around?
Yeah, we can actually kind of do that this time. Well, let me see how many people we got. Not through the webinar. We don't. When we do it in person, we tend to kind of introduce each other, but we can get it started. Yeah.
You know what might be interesting or helpful for me? If you are a developer or an advanced like coder, can you use the clap reaction so I can see how many that is. And if you consider yourself more of like a business owner or a user that's more like a power user or not a coder, maybe you can use a thumbs up reaction. And those are down in the Zoom. That gives me a feel of who I'm talking to. Awesome. And then we have a few others, and I don't know who you are. But
bloggers, kind of
you can give me a heart because you just love WordPress, but you are neither of the above. So, okay, cool. Let me share my screen and then we can talk accessibility. All right. So hopefully everybody can see my slides. Christina, I'm not going to be able to see the chat. So I'm happy to answer questions throughout, and I will pause a little bit, but also anyone, if you want to put in the chat, maybe you can moderate, or if you want to unmute and just kind of be like, hey, Amber, I have a question. Totally go for it.
All right.
So I'm happy to answer however makes sense or works for everyone. So also, if you like slides, I know some people like to have them to look back to. I do have some links in my slides. You can go to equalizedigital.com/slides. And the other piece that I forgot to mention when I was doing the little poll about who people were, if you would like me, is there anyone on this chat, and maybe just throw in the chat and Christina can let me know, that needs visual description of the images in my slides because you cannot see them. So if you do, just let us know and I will visually describe things. Okay, I'm going to assume that's a no. All right, so the goals for today is to talk about what website accessibility means, what some current laws related to website accessibility are, and if they apply to your company or the clients that you serve. And then my goal is that hopefully everybody will be able to identify common accessibility issues on websites, know how to test their website for accessibility, and leave with some actionable examples of things that you could go fix on your website right now, even if you are not a developer. So that's the goals for today. When I'm talking about website accessibility, what am I talking about? I'm talking about a website that can be used by everyone, people of all abilities and disabilities. I have up on the slide right now a word cloud that shows all kinds of different words related to disabilities. And I think what's really important to know is that when we're talking about website accessibilities, yes, we are talking about some of the things we commonly think of. So like a blind person who would be interacting with your website on a screen reader, or a deaf person who would need to have captions on a video in order to know what is being said in the video. However, there are a broad range of other situations or limitations that can impact someone's ability to engage with a website. So this could be something like a mobility impairment, which means I can't use a traditional keyboard and mouse. Maybe I can only use the keyboard, or maybe I can't have use of my hands at all. And so I use speech in order to tell my computer or my mobile device how to navigate the web, or I use eye tracking software in order to engage with the computer. As well as things like low vision. So someone might be sighted, but they have very low vision. And so they have to zoom in, and every website that they engage with, they're zoomed in at 200%, let's say. Or things that we don't normally think of as disabilities. So language learners can benefit from this because accessible websites are more likely to function with translation tools. They can also benefit people that have situational limitations. An example of this would be every night when I lay down with my 18-month-old, I want to, be on my phone. I can't play video sound, but maybe I want to watch something. I need to have the captions. So I'm a hearing person, but I still benefit from captions in certain situations. So it's a really broad audience who are impacted by website accessibility or can benefit from website accessibility features. So why does it matter? There are more than 1 billion people in the world who have a disability. It's about 15% of the world's population. And here in the United States, 1 in 4 adults have a disability. And then there is $490 billion of after-tax disposable income for working age people with disabilities in the United States. And I think this is a really important number, especially if you're making websites for clients, because or for even for your own business. But we've heard sometimes where businesses have said, or people have said, well, it doesn't matter, they're not in my customer demographic, they wouldn't buy from me anyway, right? But this is a group that has a huge amount of money that they can spend. And even if you make a product that you don't think they would use, so let's say a car, for example. Yes, a blind person may not drive a car, but a blind person may still be the decision maker in that household, or the person who really cares about how fuel efficient their vehicle is. They may be the person who wants to do all the research for the car that their household is going to buy. Or you might have a product that they might not use, but they might want to purchase as a gift for someone else. So this is a population that has money to spend, and they are most definitely in your customer base when we're talking about 1 in 4 US adults. This is being jumpy. So I have this chart up that shows e-commerce growth, and we all know what happened, right? So before, there was some e-commerce and all that, and then 2020 happened and there was a huge spike, and now we are engaging in all sorts of online purchases, online food ordering, online grocery shopping, way more than we ever did. And so this is really where it starts to come into play. Even more people are interacting with businesses on the web. So right now, I love this quote. It's from John Copeland. He's the vice president of marketing and customer insights at Adobe. And he really talks about why it is important in the time like this post-COVID era to really understand who your customers are and to reach them where they are. And he said companies need to pay extra special attention to their digital and e-commerce experiences right now. Consumers are less forgiving during a time like this, referencing a really stressful time, or a time when things are not happening the way they think they should be. And companies that meet and exceed their needs will build loyalty and lifetime value. And it really is true. If you can create a website that can be used by a person with disabilities, or language learners, or someone who is situationally in a place where they need those accessibility features, then they are more likely to return to your website over and over again, especially if your competitor's website is not accessible. So accessibility matters because, it's good karma. It's the right thing to do. But of course, we all know that businesses need business cases. So there are some other reasons why. It allows your organization to reach all people. It's good for SEO. It can increase revenue opportunities. And maybe, I don't know why this is being so jumpy. Weird. All right, hold on. Sorry, guys. And in some cases, it's legally required. So I'm going to talk about some of the laws, and then I'll pause and answer questions. I always preface this with, I'm not a lawyer. So I spend a lot of time reading about this, researching this, following some accessibility lawyers. So I'm going to communicate what I know from my experience. But if you want actual legal advice, you should always consult an attorney. So we approach accessibility in the law here in the United States under the guise that accessibility is a civil right. So there are certain things in our community that we believe all people should have equal access to. The top levels of this are things like education, transit, voting, healthcare, employment, human services. But in general, if you think about the Americans with Disabilities Act and other things like that, we tend to believe that everyone should have equal ability to participate fully in our society. And so that's really the underpinning behind a lot of the laws that have been put in place in the United States. There's a couple of laws that are relevant to websites and accessibility. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 has 2 sections that come into play. Section 504, which says no otherwise qualified individual with a disability shall, by reason of his or her disability, be excluded from participation in or denied the benefits of receiving any federal financial assistance or any activity that is federally funded, being able to participate in that. So that means that any government agencies, federally funded projects, K through 12 schools, post-secondary entities, any nonprofits that receive federal grant funds, all have to have an accessible website, and they need to make sure that they're not excluding people with disabilities in order to continue receiving their funding. Section 508 specifically bars the federal government from procuring electronic and information technology goods and services, which includes website design, that are not fully accessible to those with disabilities. So if you are selling your services to clients that are, let's say, a university, then they have to purchase an accessible website from you, and it has to be accessible. So under this, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, basically what can happen is that if a complaint arises, they could file an administrative complaint. They're allowed to file a private lawsuit in a federal district court, or they can file a formal complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Civil Rights. There's no specific fine or anything like that in place with this law, but a federally funded program could be the result of a private lawsuit. The next thing that comes into play, and this is the one that is most commonly applicable to for-profit businesses in the United States, is the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. There are two titles that are relevant to it. Title II relates to communications with people with disabilities and says that it must be as effective as communications with others. And then Title III deals with public accommodation of people with disabilities. There's no clear laws specifically about how the ADA applies to the web. There's no specific regulations that have been passed, like with Section 508, that says this, you have to meet WCAG 2.0 AA in order to achieve and be compliant with Section 508. ADA does not have that. And what we have seen is, for the most part, across the United States, it's all of it is coming into play through lawsuits. You may have heard about the Domino's case that went to the Supreme Court a couple of years ago. And for the most part, with the exception of, there was a case earlier this year in the District 9, which handles Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. And in that case, it was a lawsuit against Winn-Dixie and they said, okay, well, Winn-Dixie doesn't actually sell anything on their website, so you weren't blocked from going to the store because their website is accessible. So they said the ADA did not apply. Everywhere else in the United States, the cases have gone through and have been upheld. And for the most part, they have been won, saying that the ADA does apply to websites. So what the numbers look like is that as of 2020, there was, I think I have a typo on here, 3,550 lawsuits in the United States under the ADA, and you can sort of see the graph and how it goes up. So it's been increasing pretty dramatically. Even last year during COVID, when there was a huge slowdown in the courts and they weren't doing as many cases, by the end of the year, there was enough of a spike that it made up for it, and it still grew over 2019. And then if you have any customers in California, you need to be aware of, California has the Unruh Civil Rights Act, which lays out extra guidelines for what happens to what is considered an ADA violation. They say it's also a violation of the Unruh Civil Rights Act. And any sites that are inaccessible for blind customers are counted as discrimination. They're very explicit about that. So any websites that have physical nexus are subject to ADA Title III, and could, if they stay in state court, could be sued for up to almost $75,000. And having physical nexus could mean you have a sufficient number of customers that you ship your goods there. Or it could mean that you have a fulfillment center located in California, even though you aren't. Or you run a large number of ads in California, or you have an employee in California. So any of those things could make this apply to you, even if you're a Texas business. And then the other thing you have to think about with regards to your legal requirements for accessibility is that it's not just your legal requirements towards the public, but also your legal requirements against your employees or for your employees. So there have been several cases where blind employees were required as part of their job duties to use a website or a software application that was not usable for them. And they ended up suing their employer and winning because they were not able to do their job. And in some cases, their jobs weren't modified and they were let go. So that's something to think about, not just with your own website, if you have employees, but also the software that you purchase, if you require them to use that. Like if, let's say you use a project management tool and you have an employee who needs that accommodation, you need to make sure that your project management tool works for them. So I'm going to, and then I guess the other thing is you want to think about world laws, local governments, other areas, other states beyond. California is the big one I mentioned because it's the one where we see most of the cases right now. But New York is another big one. Pennsylvania, there's quite a few accessibility lawsuits there as well. So are there any questions before I go into best practices about the laws and whether or not they might apply to you, or any questions related to that?
I guess my only question is when it comes to these laws and these lawsuits, I mean, how I actually had a client that was getting sued.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't build the site, we were just caring for it. And so we had to go through, major revisions to it, but we just had to kind of go back and say, here's what we're doing now. Here's what we do in the future. And so we were at least able to give a presentation of a plan to make it better. And that seemed to make the lawsuit go away. I don't know. What with these lawsuits, how do you handle, I mean, how have you seen that before, and what happened?
Yeah, so with our equalized digital business and the remediation, we actually get a fair number of inquiries that it's kind of like they got spurred to this because they were sued.
Right.
So what we've seen with our clients there is there's two different types of lawsuits. One is it's a lawsuit from a legitimate user who really wants to make the website better. They probably already tried reaching out and then made no progress. Like they didn't just start by suing the company, right?
And last
yes.
resort. Yeah.
And those users are the ones who, if you're going to get sued, that's what you want, because those are the ones who want the website to be made better. And they just want to know that you are listening to them and that you have a plan for making it better. And a lot of times, yes, it will go away if you can prove that you are making progress and this is what you're doing and this is the timeline that it's going to be. The other kind of lawsuit that is increasingly being found is what they call drive-by lawsuits. And they are, someone has scanned a website, they've found that it has obvious automatically detectable accessibility problems, and then it may not even be a customer of the website. Sometimes law firms do it, and then they find a blind person to then be the plaintiff, and they sue them, and the goal is to get money. So in those instances, it's, you almost always, what I've heard from attorneys is you almost always settle, no matter what, you settle. But they're going to be less receptive to the, here's our game plan for fixing it. You're still going to have to settle. And so I think the thing too, that I've heard from some of the attorneys that I've spoken to in this space that specialize in it is having an obvious accessibility statement in your footer of the website can help ward off those, I mean, either kind of lawsuit, really, because if you show.
So an accessibility statement about what? Just that.
Yeah, so I can actually show you real quick.
I don't mean to get you off track. If you're going to answer these
That's all
later
right.
on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great thing. So we have ours, and it's either can be found under our company,
Mm-hmm.
or it's also in the footer of our website,
Sure.
down here. Some
So in
people put
addition
them
to
down by
policy-
their privacy policy.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And it's a page on our website that just says, hey, we're committed to accessibility. This is what we do.
Hmm.
And then we talk about what the accessibility efforts on our website is, what guidelines we follow, what tools we use to test, what we've done already to try and make our website accessible. And then we have like contact information. The other thing we recommend for our clients, if they know, so we put a lot of effort in, right? But if you've just started, you know, there's problems. And I was just looking at this on, what was I looking at it on? Oh, the Magnolia website, like Chip and Joanna, they're like silos thing in Waco. They have something, and it says like, we are currently working on like improving our color contrast, like things like that. And they're listing out, these are areas that we know we're deficient and we are working on, but you know, you can't fix everything overnight. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's like, in addition to saying, here's what we've already done, like in between these sections, you might have it, this is what we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
And then the big thing is having like a really clear, like how to call you and how to email, and don't put a form on this, right? Especially if you know your forms aren't accessible, like give a real email address.
That's pretty funny. Yeah.
And we made ours like it's pretty clear that it's only for this page, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you want to like have a way for them to contact you. And from what I've heard from attorneys, like having this on your website is a really great proactive way to both tell people how they can get help if they're having a problem, and also it can ward off some of those lawsuits.
You got to get hooked up with Termageddon. Get this sucker on Termageddon.
Yeah, we've been talking with them actually, because we include a draft of this in our pro version, but you could also just come like copy it off our website and modify it for your use too, right? But yes, the lawsuits are a tricky one, and I think, you know, as much as possible, you want to show that you're doing it, but it is a lot like privacy policy. Like having a statement there is helpful, like disclose to people the current status.
And how to reach you if you have a problem. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to also bring up to everybody that it's happening. These lawsuits are coming down the pipeline. People are getting extremely aware of this now. And so it's just like we used to think about responsive website. Now it's a responsive and accessible website. So
Yep. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the best practices are and the background behind the guidelines, which are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which I'll pretty much call WCAG throughout this presentation. So there are 4 sections in those guidelines, and they're based around these 4 concepts, which all add up to create something that is usable for everyone. So a website should be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable means that information needs to be transformable from one form to another. So the main content and message should be able to be separated from the way it is styled or presented. And I'll give you some specific examples of that. So if you have a video and someone cannot hear, then you need to have captions on the video, or even better, a transcript below the video, which allows them to get all of the information that they would need out of the video. That's one example. Another example is if you have a graph and it's an image of a graph, then, or even if it is a graph that's built dynamically on the web page, but if it's not easily accessed by someone on a screen reader, then you could provide, for example, a table down below, which would enable them to access that same information that is in the graph, but in a different form. Another thing is to keep in mind is that you want to know that if you completely turned off the styles on your web page, so that all that was there was the raw HTML of the page, that person should still be able to get all of the information that they need out of the page. So I've seen on some websites where people use an image for an event, and the event has the name of the event, the name of the speaker, the time and date, the, where to RSVP link, how much the tickets cost, all of those things. And it's just like on an event poster that you've made maybe to print out, and then you put the image on the website. Well, if someone can't see that image, then you need to make sure that you have all the exact same text that is on that image actually in real text on the page, right? So you want to make sure that image can be separated from that content can be separated from how you've presented it or styled it. Operable goes back to this idea that I mentioned before, that not everyone uses a standard keyboard or mouse to navigate the web. So you need to have multiple ways for people to interact with your website, no matter which kind of device that they're on. Users should be given control over time limits or timing. So if you have sliders that are going automatically, they should have the ability to pause them if they can't read that quickly, so that they can read and absorb what is on that slide before it changes to something else. You need to have really clear instructions and error recovery operations. That all sort of falls under operable. So if you have a form and they fill out a field wrong, it needs to have clear instructions about why it was wrong, so they know what they can do to fix it and actually be able to submit the form. I'm getting a weird, I don't know what Google Slides is doing to me today. Sorry. There we go. Super weird. Sorry, guys. So understandable is the next part of the POUR acronym. And really what this gets at is making sure that everyone can understand the information that is on the website. So some items under that are having appropriately targeted language or reading level, having supplemental representation of information, like I talked about with captions or transcripts for podcasts. If you have really long articles, considering putting like a summary or an excerpt or an abstract, if you will, before that, to sort of summarize what it is for people that maybe have lower reading levels. And then also under understandable is things related to understandable functionality. So the navigation structure should make sense, the form interactions, if something is really detailed. So let's say you have a pricing table that lists out features, and you have an internal or branded name for something, but really it's not clear what that is. Maybe you make tooltips available that explains to someone, oh, this is what this feature is, so that it's really understandable, both how to use it and then also the content itself is understandable. And then robust is the last part. And what that relates to, and there's the smallest number of guidelines under this, but basically your website should have functionality across current and, as much as possible, future devices. Obviously, we can't fully future-proof things, but we want to try our best. Operating systems, browsers, devices. You do need to provide support for some outdated versions of browsers. It's important to note that a lot of people who use assistive technology don't always upgrade the second that a new version of a device or a operating system is available, because what they have is one that they're used to and they know works. And so they may be hesitant to upgrade. So you do need to, as much as possible, have some backwards compatibility. And then just in general, the guidelines here relate to validating against technical standards for whatever platform you're using. So WordPress, for example, has standards for what's considered an accessibility ready theme. So you would want to have a theme that meets those standards as a guideline, and then following some of the other best practices for websites, or following, the WCAG guidelines. So what does this actually mean in a project? I'm going to go through sort of a checklist of some highlights. If you're super into like building projects, I have a full checklist I can provide to you. I'm happy to, if you want to just like email me or message me. But We're going to start with, when do we start thinking about accessibility? Every step of the way. So as much as possible, you want to start thinking about accessibility early on. It's definitely easier to tackle if you're building a new website, if you start thinking about it in the design phase, even before you even start coding. A lot of people think accessibility is just about how the website is coded, but it's not. It really is related to the design, related to the content that is on the page. And then that means that even after you've launched the website, it's a little bit like SEO, right? We don't just say, oh, I search engine optimize my website, I'm done. It's an ongoing thing that you have to do on a regular basis, and accessibility is the same way. You need to, as you're editing content on your website, keep accessibility in mind. So there is a study that is put out by WebAIM, and they do it a couple times a year. This specific data is from February of this year. And what they do is they use the WAVE tool, which is a free accessibility testing tool, and they scan the top 1 million websites based on traffic's homepage. And they figure out how many of them have accessibility errors. It's like around 97%. And what are the most common errors that are seen? So these are things that you want to think about as like items that are most likely to be present on your website if you haven't, or a client's website if you haven't thought about accessibility, and things that potentially could be tackled or fixed. So 85% of websites have low contrast errors. That's where there is not sufficient difference in the background color and the text color, and it makes it hard for people with lower vision to read. And I'll even say I've been on websites where I consider myself, as long as I've got my contacts in, a normally sighted person. If I don't, I have all kinds of problems, but that I even have trouble reading because of contrast. So this is a super common problem, and generally something that, depending on how your website is built, could be controlled within your content, like your page builder, or it may require fixes in your theme. And then 68% are missing alternative text. We'll talk more about that in a minute. 58% have empty links. This is most commonly, I see this a lot on social media links. For example, if you use social media icons to link out to your Facebook page or your Instagram page, and it's putting in, let's say, a font awesome Instagram F, but it doesn't actually have the words. So somebody on a screen reader would visit that and they would just hear link, but they wouldn't actually know that it goes to Facebook if it hasn't been coded in that way. So that it would just say link, but they have no idea where that link went. So that's what an empty link is. Missing labels, this relates to forms. So if you have a form where there is a field, you need to have a label above it or next to it that specifically says what this field is for. Put your name in this one, put your email address in this one. That's what that's relating to. Missing language is something that is 100% a theme code problem. And that is that in the document HTML, it should specify what the language of the content on the page is. This is necessary in order for screen reader users to be able to hear from their screen reader the website in the correct language and get the correct pronunciation of words. And then the 25% have empty buttons, which is pretty similar to empty links, only it's a button, not a link. So these are the most common accessibility problems. Let's talk about some things that you could fix on your website right now, probably. I mean, they're all things you could fix. I hope that we don't all have these problems, but a lot of us probably do. So the first thing is, under content, don't add text as images. As much as possible, you should never have any images on your website that have text. If you use an occasional meme, that's okay, as long as in the alternative text, you also include a description of what the words are. But I've seen cases where a designer designed this super cool like heading style that, I don't know, looked like word art. If you can imagine Microsoft Word clip art from the 90s, right? Where it's all wavy and stuff. And so the developer's like, I can't code that. They just make it a picture and they stick it on the screen, right? So then somebody is going to miss out on that. So as much as possible, text should be text. You need to provide captions for your videos and provide transcripts for both audio and video files. The reason why you need transcripts for videos and not just captions is because if someone is deaf blind, then they cannot access captions on the video. They need the transcript in order for it to output it to their refreshable Braille display. Be careful about reading level. Obviously, if your target demographic is, let's say, academics or medical doctors or something like that, the average reading level on your site would be higher. But if you're speaking to just a general broad consumers, 9th grade is about considered the max reading level that you should have for your general content. Then avoid rapid flashing no more than 3 times per second. This is because people with photosensitive epilepsy can actually have seizures if something flashes rapidly on the website. So you want to make sure that if you have a slider or a GIF, I will tell you GIFs, you shouldn't really have GIFs that can't be paused. But if you have anything that flashes rapidly, you want to either slow it down or remove it. And then you want to make sure that any sliders or anything that plays automatically has controls that allow people to stop or pause that from playing. So I mentioned alt text, and that's one of the biggest problems that there is. So all images need appropriate alt text. It is only okay to leave your alt text empty if the image is 100% purely decorative. Otherwise, you need to have alt text that describes the image or describes the image function. So I'll give you a couple of different examples of that. Describing the image function happens when you're linking an image. So if you have an image like your logo at the top of the header of your page, and it goes to your home page when someone clicks it, you don't want the alternative text to describe what your logo looks like. Like you wouldn't want it to say, so ours, for example, says Equalize Digital Websites for Everyone tagline, right? So I wouldn't want to say Equalize Digital logo with websites for everyone as my alternative text. What I actually want my alt text on that to be is go to Equalize Digital homepage, because it's a link. And so they're going to hear link. You don't want them to hear link Equalize Digital logo websites for everyone. You want to hear them, have them hear link, go to Equalize Digital homepage, or link Equalize Digital homepage. So any sort of functional or linked images, the alt text should describe where it's going. Same thing with like social media icons. We see that sometimes if someone uses an image, they just say Facebook logo, but actually it's like visit Facebook page would be the correct alternative text for that. Otherwise, you want to think about images making sense within the context of the content or what it is. So in this product example I have up here, we probably actually want to describe the product in a way that would be meaningful for a user of this product or a potential purchaser of this product to know, what is the fish hook remover? If you can't see it, you probably need to know what it looks like in order to decide if you want to purchase it or not. I'm going to stop here because a lot of times people have questions about alternative text, and I'd be happy to answer any if there are any.
My only thing is we've always been taught with SEO to have an SEO keyword. Now, having the homepage be descriptive, I think being able to separate the two between a photo of a SEO-ish kind of photo, a product like this, if you're trying to optimize a site and this is a product you're trying to optimize for, I think regardless, describing it is probably just an SEO keyword anyway. I mean, but on the flip side, I can see imagery that have a function, like you're saying, the Facebook buttons, a button image or that makes way more sense to me, because I was always kind of like, yeah, but what about SEO? But
yeah. I think so. I remember, I don't know, like 5-6 years ago, everybody would be like, just use the same target keyword, focus keyword on every image, right? But I feel like now we kind of know, even for SEO, like that's not good for SEO. Like you want to describe what's in the image, and probably describing what's in the image is going to help the SEO on that page. Like Google doesn't want to see stuffed keywords everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think they've gotten smarter too. The algorithm and what they're able to understand now and how they're interpreting it in real world English is getting better and better when it comes to
mhm,
SEO and SEO search. And so they're understanding the nuances of words now, even in pay-per-click advertising, you see that. And so, they got rid of modified keywords or modified phrases, and now it's just a phrase because
mhm,
it just made more sense to them. There's no reason, because phrases in of itself, they're able to understand the nuance of a plural word,
mhm,
modifiers. And I think that's what's happening here in terms of alternative text is stop trying to game the system. They're smart, and Google's smart enough now to know what this
mhm,
image is, but you're better off just describing it. Just
mhm.
it's a
Yeah. And
green
I
and
think the
black.
thing, if you really care about SEO, like one of the ways to put accessibility is Google's like the most frequent and like largest blind user of your website,
Mm-hmm.
right? So thinking about that, like their crawler, the way they're going to engage with your website is similar in some ways to how a screen reader user might engage with your website. And so you really do, like, you don't want to be overly verbose. We say usually keep it to 150 characters or less. If you have something that requires a huge amount of description to describe, then it's probably better to say, like in this, you might say like fish hook remover products, find additional information below or something like that, right below image. And you could literally write that in the alt text if you wanted to write up a big paragraph about, or we see this sometimes with charts or graphs, right? Data table below image. And then they know, okay, the data table is below, I can skip the image and get to the information of what I want. But
What
you
about the
also don't want to be
description though?
repetitive.
Yeah, not repetitive. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you don't want to. That's the other thing with the keywords, right? You don't want to repeat. Like if the sentence above it said something, you don't want to just stick that same phrase on the image. Um, so and really, it should make sense contextually within the page. So
Do accessibility tools use things like caption and the description, those fields?
so yes, if the caption is there, it would read out the caption. I don't think it would read the description. I'm not even sure, honestly,
I
if
know we have that.
WordPress themes output description in the HTML.
Yeah, I'm wondering why we even have that description
Um,
field in there.
if your theme outputs the title, it
Mhm.
will read the title, but it's actually considered incorrect because you don't want to have an alt text and a title. So that's actually generally an accessibility problem. You normally only want to have the alt text, not the title. And most WordPress themes that follow WordPress best practices don't output both.
Hmm.
They only will do the alt text. And so the title is more of like an internal thing for your, and as you can see, it fills it in with a very unuseful
Well, it
phrase
fills it in with the
anyway, which is
file
why
name.
most themes don't output it, because
Yeah.
product image 1B, no screen reader user needs to hear that.
No, well, that's again another question I had in terms of the file name itself, right? So I hate it when I get a developer puts in like the iStock underscore 4577.jpg, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
gah,
Like they didn't rename it yet.
right, just rename it. For one thing, so we can search for it later, but other from an SEO and accessibility standpoint. But if you have a file name, is that an accessibility factor?
So the file name only comes into play if so if the image is coded in a way such that there is alt equals quote quote with nothing in there, then that means that alt text has not been filled in, but the alt exists in the HTML.
Mhm.
That's when it's decorative and it just ignores the image. It doesn't even announce that there's an image present. And
Oh.
really, the only things that should be considered decorative would be like a little swoosh or a divider image or something like that. Like anything, even an image that you've put on a blog post and it's like, I don't know, a dog running on a beach. Like there's probably a reason why you chose a dog running on a beach and not a cat. Like it probably adds some value to your article, and so it needs something. But in some themes, and this would be considered an accessibility error, they fail to output the alt tag at all. So it's an image and it doesn't even have an alt equals quote quote with no information. It literally doesn't have alt at all. So then what happens is is the screen reader encounters that image and it says image, and it reads out the entire image URL, or sometimes, depending on the screen reader, just the image name. But as you can imagine, this can be really bad. Like no one wants to hear, image with a full long URL that includes WP content / 2020/01, right? Like nobody wants to hear that, or even if you've got these not meaningful things. And so that's why that's considered a problem, because it's not helpful at all to hear that kind of information. So generally the file name like that matters more for SEO than it does for accessibility, actually. So another big thing under content that's like one of the top mistakes that we see, it's harder to scan for, which is why I think it doesn't come up on the web aim as high. But I mean, this is like one of the biggest mistakes that we see all the time, is what's called ambiguous link anchor text. So the link anchor text is the actual visible words on the page that have been linked. And why this matters is because screen reader users, just like sighted users, want to be able to skim through content quickly and find what they're looking for. And one of the ways that they can skim through content is they could ask their screen reader to just read them every link on the page, so that they could then get faster to where they're trying to go. And so if you have a bunch of links that say, click here, read more details, buy now, and there's multiple of those on a page, then they would just hear link, click here, link, click here, link, click here. And they would have no idea where those links go, what would happen if they actually targeted one of those links to go on them, and should I pick the first one or the third one, right? So sometimes this comes into play with the themes. So for example, read more links usually come from a theme, and the correct themes that are properly developed should then add hidden screen reader text that's not visible to a sighted user, but then adds the title of the blog post, for example. So it would say, read more about blog post name. But if you're manually adding content to your page, then this is something that you can control. So for example, instead of saying, to contact us, click here, you would just want to link contact us to your contact page, right? Same thing if you have multiple videos and or downloads on your page and you're just adding them manually, like download, like you need to be specific, download this thing. And if you don't want to have the visible, like you still just want the button to say download, then you can add screen reader text when you're editing that. And like this will work in any page builder or in Gutenberg block editor, classic editor. You just have to, it's slightly different how you do it, but you add screen reader text that makes it hidden visually. And so you would still need to add those in that way. So your buttons can look short, but they still have more information on them. So I'll talk briefly about accessibility in design and development, but I don't know that we have a ton of designers and we only have a couple of developers, and I'm happy to answer more questions about it if people want to go more in depth. But basically in design, you want to make sure that the website has a consistent interface, look for color contrast, aware of line length issues. So generally we try not to make content areas more than like 700 pixels wide. Because it's really hard for people to track if you get on a big monitor and you set it to like 100% width, right? Or even like 1200 pixels can be really hard to go from this line and then go back to the next line as you're reading. You want to make sure that you keep related items close to each other. So if you have a field, I've seen this before where instead of having the label for the field, like enter your name here above, they've put it next to them, which looks great on mobile. And then on a desktop, it goes like this. It gets really wide. And then there's this huge gap in between them. And if there's 4 different fields and 4 different labels, it's hard for me to look across and know which one is supposed to go where. So you want to keep any related items close together. And, they don't have to be on top of each other necessarily, but they need to be close enough that it's really obvious what goes with what. In your design, you need to make sure that you have clear focus states for links and buttons, and I'll show you what that means in just a little bit. And then you want to make sure, as I mentioned before, that you have designs for error states that obviously show someone if they've made an error in entering a form.
Hey, so Amber, DJ had a
Mhm.
question back a little bit about the
Oh,
read
yeah.
more. What's the alternative phrase for read more? Like if you got read more, click here. For me, I just put either read more about whatever subject, and I just try and keep it super
Yeah.
short.
So there's two ways to do it. One is the screen reader text, and I can show you what that looks like on an actual website in a minute, or you would actually want to write it out. Like if you're entering content, and let's say you're building a page, it's going to be a top level page, and then you're going to have 3 sub pages, and you have a little blurb like heading, blurb, and then you want to say like read more. Like you'd probably want to say like read more about, page title, read more about page title for the next one. You just want to make sure that it's really clear where they go. So then from a development standpoint, you want to follow basic web standards, set the page language, which we talked about, use proper semantics. So buttons or things that are supposed to function like buttons should actually be buttons, not divs that you use JavaScript to make act like a button. Like you want to use proper HTML. As much as possible, foreground images, and they need to have alt text unless it really is purely decorative, and then it can be a background image. Hide, you can, as I mentioned, you can hide informative text for screen reader users with the CSS class, and then it doesn't display, but the content is still there and a screen reader will read it out. And then we want to go mobile first responsive design, and it needs to be able to be navigated by keyboard only, which I'll demo in just a minute. So I'm going to show you how you might go about testing your website. There's a couple of different tools and a couple of different ways. This is going to be a super fast, like kind of high level how to test, because I know we're kind of running up on time a little bit, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it. I have this is our demo website that we just test on. So this is literally a theme with demo content that we've just installed. Not a real website, but you can get a gist of it. There's a couple of different tools that we like for automated testing, and a free one that is super great and for getting started. It's not the one that we use all the time because I don't think it's as thorough as some of the other ones, but a good like just getting started and trying to figure it out tool is called Wave. In my slides, if you hit my slides, there is a link here that takes you to a website for them, and you can put any web page address in and it will just test that page. Otherwise, you can install a extension in your browser, and they have extensions for a lot of different browsers. I happen to be in Chrome right now. So if I am on this page and I hit this Wave extension, then it pops up for me a tab on the left, which tells me I've got 3 errors, 43 contrast errors, 12 alerts, which are things that might be a problem, might not. I need to look at them and decide. 48 features. Structural elements are the number of like HTML elements that it's on the page, and ARIA elements are items that specifically were added in order to make it more accessible for screen readers. And I could then click over onto the details tab and I can see what the problems are. If I'm not sure what this means, like a linked image is missing alternative text, I can click on this and it will jump me down and I'll see, okay, this is the one that it's telling me is the problem that I need to fix. And if I don't know what this means, I can click the I and it will give me some more information about this. Wave is super common and probably the one you'll hear talked about the most. I don't think it's quite as thorough as it could be. There's one thing that I always call out for everyone to be aware of is they recently, they changed this and I'm not totally sure why, but they decided that images missing alternative text or with empty alternative text was a feature instead of something that I think should be a warning, something you should assess. Because obviously I don't think 22 images on this page are all decorative. Probably 22 images on this page, or some large percentage of them actually need alternative text on them, right? So if you use this, we've had people say, oh, they only look at this, and then they think anything green is good. You still need to look at these and determine, because these could be problems, not necessarily good things. Just because it's green doesn't mean that it's good. So this is a good way to get started. And even if you're not a developer, if you're working with a developer, you could run this and start to say, hey, if you run it and you have zero errors, zero contrast errors, like that's awesome. But if you see things 3 errors, and even if you don't know what it means, you could kind of say, okay, I went on my website, it said that there's a linked image missing alternative text. It's right here, and send that to your developer and they can probably help you fix it. So this is a tool that will do automated testing. The other one that we like and that we use in our testing is called Axe. Axe has a free version. Oops, sorry, let me get out of the mobile view. Axe has a free version, and they also have Pro. It is the same thing where you install a browser extension and then it adds it into your dev tools if you're a developer. So you can do right-click inspect. So what I did was I hit right-clicked on anything, it doesn't matter, and hit inspect, and that opens up this developer tools section. And then if I click on this arrow, I can go to Axe Dev Tools. I can then log in. Actually, I could just show you the free version, but I'm not logged in, so I won't be able to, well, let's see. No. Go away, one password. Okay. So anyway, I'll hit scan my page, and then you can see it came up with 78 automatic issues. These are things where it's definitely like, okay, we know this is a problem. 34 items that need review. It's like not sure if it's a problem or not. And then if we were logged in, then they have a whole like guided testing thing where it will walk you through some of the manual tests that you need to do on your website. Because the one thing that's important to note is that the automated scanners can only catch between 30 or 40% of problems. So you do have to do some manual testing in order to really know if your website is accessible and usable for everyone. But this puts it here. It has similar features. So I could click highlight on something. So let's look at this. Highlight. So it's highlighted this for me. And it's saying that this doesn't have color contrast, and it tells me is the impact, in this instance, it's saying it's serious. And you can see which the elements are. And
How does it not say that that's a color contrast? Is like, of course, again, from my perspective, I'm like, that's good color contrast. Why is that?
Yeah, so there is actually a mathematical formula for color contrast. And if you want to test it, I usually use WebAIMS. Do I have it in my history? Yeah, this is the one that I typically use. So there's a contrast ratio, which looks at the relative luminance between the background and the foreground colors. And there are 2 different levels of color contrast, AA and AAA. In everything we build, we target doing AAA for color because we just think it's really important. We want everyone to be able to see it. And so this is the one that I use the most. There's a ton of these if you Google them, but it explains a little bit more about it. But yeah, that does fail. Where was I? That does fail color contrast because it's not sufficiently different. Does this specifically say what the contrast ratio on this one is? Probably. Yeah, so here, so this element, it has a ratio of 3.63. So it's like a mathematical formula that it's done. And in order to hit AA, it needs to be 4.5 to 1. So it's close, but not quite. I will say that color contrast is one of the hardest things to get right. So a lot of times if we're like not sure about this, I might go, so if I flip over to inspect, I could just grab this color code
Mhm.
and I might go manually check it. Also, I should note that it works either way. So it doesn't matter if it's foreground or background, it's the exact same ratio. So in this instance, I stuck it in the foreground because there was already white here.
Now,
So
what
if
would be
I wanted
awesome is if it gave me a recommended color, like instead of this
Yeah,
specific.
so what is helpful on this tool is you can drag. So
There you
if I go to
go.
this,
Okay.
now I'm AA compliant.
Mm.
And then if I go to this, now I'm AAA compliant.
Boy, that's really careful when you talk to clients or even you work on your own website, the brand colors, because you get some clients that have like really very specific brand colors. And
Yeah, and that's a thing that we do a lot of work with Colorado State University, and this is a thing that they're going through internally because their primary color is like a dark green and gold, and then they have like 5 different accent, or they have 2 secondary colors and 4 tertiary colors, and all of them fail color contrast. All of them. And they're section 508, like they have to be accessible. And so we've been like really working with them to figure out, I mean, a really common one that I see too, besides that, is like orange buttons with white, like orange almost never. It has to be like burnt orange for it to pass color contrast. Otherwise, you need to have a light orange with black text. Which people are like, I don't like that. I like the white better. But yeah, I think that's where I was saying, as much as you can move it forward, but I think you just have to talk about it with clients and give them sort of the understanding that there are trade-offs, but in the end, it should be worth it, because if you can, a lot of accessibility stuff does help SEO, and it has been shown to increase conversions. So if it can improve your ranking, bring more customers to your website, and allow more people to make purchases or fill out your inquiry forms, it is probably worth it to make your red slightly darker.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I agree. Yeah.
So, but it is definitely hard, like on that front. The other thing to keep in mind with colors, which Adobe has a really cool,
another thing too that I'm seeing is the latest is these neat little animations. Things that kind of slide in as you're going down. Does that affect accessibility? I've heard it does, but
so, and actually beyond that, also parallax, which is when there's, I'm sure you know, but just in case anyone doesn't know, there's an image that stays in the back and the content moves in front of it and it makes it look like the image is static. That can actually make people with certain like visual impairments or like TBIs or something, it can like make them nauseous, or it can like really be disorienting for them and make it hard for them to read the content. But the example that I always give with our clients when they're like, I really want all this stuff to come in and all of that, is, so one, sliders, there's tons of data that sliders don't work, and sliders can even hurt conversion. So there's like literal, I can be like, here's research studies why you should not, from like really like Nielsen, like really legit places about why you should not have a slider on your website. And then for all that moving in stuff, what I do is I say, okay, who is your dream company in your industry? Like if you could become publicly traded in your industry, who would you be? Right. And if they're all like, oh, Apple or whatever, whatever it might be, we go look at that website, you'll notice there's zero movement. Right. Like if you go look at any of those, like nothing comes.
Apple's a bad example.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Apple, but like there's no, Apple does not have any. I'm pretty sure we did this with a client recently. Let's see.
I'm curious. Yeah.
Like there is no swooping.
I thought they had things swooping.
Nope.
Nope. No swooping.
And here's the deal too, on the SEO side, right? Core Web Vitals is a huge thing right now.
Yeah.
And that is impacting, it has started impacting Google search ranking. And all of that like JavaScript that makes all that stuff happen on your site, it slows your site down. It makes it not as good on mobile, and it will negatively impact your SEO, and it will not help your sales.
Yeah, one of the first things we get rid of is the slideshow. That's like that's an automatic. I can
Yeah.
improve it by a whole second if we get rid of that thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
accessibility and getting rid of all the JavaScript and animation, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So this is the other thing that's relevant to think about with colors too. If you are working with clients to do branding, we always come and check here on Adobe's color accessibility tool, because it gives you colorblind simulations. And one of the things that you want to do is make sure that your colors are significantly different from one another. Not just, so in this instance, we have two colors that are not significantly different in the main color palette. And then also you can see down here that if somebody had tritanopia, I'm not very good at saying those, that there's also gonna, like, this won't look sufficiently different to them. So this is a cool tool that will help you figure out, what should our color palettes be? Okay, this will work no matter who it is. So it puts a little line on them if they're in contrast. So then the other automated tool that we use besides Axe is we have our plugin, which is called Accessibility Checker. There's a free version on WordPress.org. You can use it on unlimited posts and pages. This particular website is built with Gutenberg, but it would scan other page builders. And it puts a scanning summary on the bottom of your poster page edit screen for that. And you can do sort of the same thing where you can go to details and you can see what's going on, what the problem is. We have the ability, if you go and fix something, if you update something, so if we just said incorrect heading order, and we went and looked at, we could look at this one, this H5, your best local roofing service. I'm going to just search for it. Actually, no, I know where that one is. So that's up here at the very top. And this is another super common problem. Headings are supposed to be used in outline format, just like when you're writing an English paper in high school. They're not supposed to be used to make text bigger or smaller or certain sizes. So what we would have to decide in this section at the top of our page, this is our heading 1. Is this really supposed to be the heading 1, but I just want it styled small? Or is this really more just like accent text? So let's say it's just accent text. I would just real quick change this to a paragraph, and I could still go over here and, make it whatever color I want, or even if I wanted to make it bigger, I could do that, right? Without making it a heading. It doesn't have to be a heading to be styled how I want. So if I do that and then I hit update on my page, it will rescan my page. And then we'll see that the incorrect heading order, it's gone. Now there's only 3.
Will this work with like Beaver Builder or Elementor?
It does. It and also Oxygen and Divi. We've tested it with all 4 page builders. It currently, we still only output on the back end of the website, but we do have plans to eventually put sort of like in Elementor, like you can see Yoast on the front end. We have a goal of doing that. We just haven't gotten there yet. But if there's items that you look at it and you're like, I'm not going to fix this. This is a random example that I think we just did. And you look at this and you're like, no, this isn't actually a problem. You could go in. So this one's been ignored globally, but you could go in on just one and you could say, I tested it. It's not broken. And you can say ignore, and it'll log who did it and the date and time. And then it would reduce your number of errors by that number, and it would show how many you've ignored. But the goal is this could help you if you get all of these to green and zeros, and then this would be 100%, and that would help you to become more accessible. Wow. And then if you want to, also, if you're auditing a website that already has existence, or there's a lot, and you have the pro version, we have an ability where you can see every issue on the site, but there's another really great view. So this site has 1,265 issues, but if I go over to Fast Track, I can actually see it grouped by individual code snippets. And there's only actually 246 code snippets, but some of them are showing up on multiple pages, right? So this, for example, is on it's on all 47 pages because it's in the footer. So when we think about how do we make a website more accessible, we want to think about how we can get the most bang for our buck, if you will. So this view is useful, or even if you're not using the pro version of our plugin, the way I would think about it is fix any issues that are in your header, fix any issues that are in your footer, because they're going to impact all of your pages. And then we go through either pages, like each page template, or we think about what are the important journeys. So I want to do the cart page, the checkout page, pages where, I have a contact form. And then lastly, you'd maybe go through your content pages based upon traffic. So pages that get more traffic, you want to look at before pages that get fewer amounts of traffic. That makes sense. And then you also have to do some manual testing, which is things like using your keyboard to just hit the tab key. Let me go back and move through the website and see, does it have, this is where we're talking about visible focus states. This one I think actually fails. It has a focus state, but it's not obviously visible enough. And I'm not sure that it has appropriate color contrast with the blue, but you want to use your tab key to move through the website. And I don't have enough time to really super go into that right now, I don't think, but I am giving a meetup on that if anybody wants to next month. And I'm happy to answer any questions. The slides, again, I can throw that link up, but there's a lot of different resources that I have on here, some links to things that I talked about. And then this is our Facebook group. We are happy to answer any questions about accessibility, and that's our WordPress accessibility meetup. And that's where I'm going to talk more and like demo a screen reader and all of that. So
cool. Oh man, that was awesome, Amber. Wow. Who knew? I just, accessibility was always like on the back burner. It just wasn't something that we really, we did think of it, but it wasn't. I think the big takeaway for me is that accessibility can help with conversions and SEO and all that. So if you have an accessible site, it will overall improve your conversions, period. So I just like how that's kind of working together, so it's cool.
I'll post the link again to the slides in case anybody wants them.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just put a note in the chat that I didn't think it was going to really apply to me very much, but I'm really motivated to make some changes.
That's awesome.
Whether it gets me more or not, but I think I can really see the value in that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, me too. I feel the same way. I'm like, I just never really thought of it that way, but yeah, it'll make a big impact for sure. Especially from a legal standpoint, my clients don't get sued.
Yeah, I think, I think about it too. It's so funny because once we've been doing accessibility since like 2016, but I feel like once I really became more aware of it, I also noticed areas in my life where like I mentioned, so a great example is I have a Fitbit, which I don't have on right now, Fitbit watch, and I put the Couch to 5K app on it. And when I was running with it, the color contrast on where it said how much time you had left, it was like, it's over it's white text over like a sunset gradient. And like, I have to put it right here in front of my face in order to even know how much time I have to keep running for. It's like,
yeah,
and I'm like, I need to message them and be like, you need to fix your color contrast because you're making it hard for me to use your app, and that's the thing, like it really does impact so many people that you don't even think about.
Well, and also just not only those with maybe disabilities, but as you get older, that's it. As I'm getting older, I'm looking at stuff like those young kids, but it's like, I'm looking at websites, like I can barely read. Is that like gray on gray? It's
Oh
just
yeah,
come
I
on,
have
people.
moments when I literally zoom in, like I'll zoom in websites and I'm like, I don't think I'm that old, but it's like some people use the tiniest fonts and I'm just like, I don't know why your font size is size 12 because it should clearly be size 18.
Yeah, and I really am thinking, because I'm in the middle of creating like an audit type of a tool, right, for myself. So there's audits out there, and I know Clifford with my web audit has one. I believe he's setting up an audit to include accessibility, but I'm trying to create my own because I just didn't use his as much. But I'm now thinking I need to add an accessibility section to this, because I've got most of my clients are B2B, and they just don't really believe that this is something they need to do. But at the flip side, a lot of these are oil and gas, energy, and they work with smaller governments. And I think that's something that smaller government, if you're going to work with them in a contract basis, it might be one of those check marks that you have to have an accessible website to work with us, because we're a government. And so
Yeah.
it's just interesting to put that into an audit tool. When you're redesigning a site, like, hey, listen, your site's really bad. It needs some changes here. And here's why.
We've also had some success with some of the people who came to us with smaller budgets with saying, well, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. Like we put it as an option on our proposal, but we're going to make you, it's sort of like Termageddon. We're going to make you sign a release of reliability saying that you chose not to make your website accessible. And that if you get sued, you will cover our legal fees if we get pulled into it.
Well, that's a good question.
And then they go, wait a minute, why are you making me sign this? Maybe this is actually important. And we're like, yeah, because I don't want to get.
I'm not going to get in trouble for it. Yeah, because who do you think you're going to send to when you get that little piece of paper? Oh, well, my designer built it, and then it's on me. So, but I'm curious though, for anyone here that's building sites, or is that an Ed? You might be able to be part of this when you're building sites. In my mind, that has to be part of it now. Now it's stuck in my brain that I need to build sites that are accessible, and not like, but because how am I going to build a site now that's not accessible like that? Like, how do you sign off and say, no, I'm not going to make it accessible?
There are some things that I just feel like you shouldn't upcharge the client for. And some of it is just like, it should be a base in your theme, like whatever starter theme you use.
Like responsive websites.
That's not responsive. Like maybe that was a thing we used to charge extra for the CSS in order to make it responsive. Because we're like, well, it takes extra time. Right. But now it's just like, who would launch, and so the way we approach it is there's things like skip to content links, color contrast as much as possible, unless a client really causes a problem about it. We always make sure if we're doing a custom theme that we add screen reader text to any ambiguous links that are coming from the code. Like we just do that because that's best practice. But the part, if they're lower budget, that we don't always do is, let's say we're importing in their content. I mean, even for big budget, like we have a very large client right now, but they have 5,000 blog posts. No one's going through those 5,000 blog posts to make sure that they didn't link the words click here, right? Because it's just, so we provide the education, and then hopefully that's something that once their website is relaunched, that they'll go through and edit over time. But then that's part of why we created the plugin, was actually to help our clients, because how would they know,
because they'll take over and they'll do a blog post and it'll be filled with click here's, click here's, click here's.
And so that's really why we're like, we need to get something right here that will show them, oh, hey, there's something you need to look at before you hit publish.
Well, now it's like the SEO, you have the Yoast grader, and now you've got the accessibility.
Yeah. This website is our demo.
I just want to get a blog post.
If there was Yoast, it would be accessibility checker, and there would be Yoast, or the other way around. I can't remember how we stack on a website.
And then you still get the clients that are like, "Why is it so expensive to do a blog post?"
Yes, right.
Because I got to do so many things.
Yes. Well, that's the problem I have too, because we'll get writers and stuff. And inevitably it'll come out with click here, and then it'll have the link. It's not even like linking click here. It's like click here, and then the full.
Oh, they just put the
next
link
to it.
next to it because
Yeah, I'm like, stop doing that. Just link the whole sentence about what you're linking to.
Yeah, I will say that if we notice that, like, and it's part of our content entry on a website project,
Mhm.
we just fix that while we're entering the content. And
That's what I do too.
but we also, as part of our content request,
Mhm.
we provide training to the clients in advance, and we make them use headings in the appropriate heading level in Google Docs or in Slick Plan, depending on where we're requesting content. And we say you have to use headings. They have to be in the right order. You need to link the text that you want linked, assuming they can. If it's a new page, they might not be able to link it. And then they have to they say link to contact page or whatever, right? Because they don't know what the URL is going to be. But
I have to say, I'm guilty of putting H5 because it's a smaller. I'm guilty of that. So now I'm like, crap, I got to stop doing that now. Now, and just use basic font
and the
size.
reason why on the headings is, again, that's like part of the skimming thing.
Mhm.
So with the screen reader, you could have it just read you all the headings on the page, or you could
Mhm.
say, read me all the H2s, and
Mhm.
then it will read all the H2s, and then you could like jump to it to get to that section.
Mhm.
Well, that's why, like, this particular demo is actually really bad. Like this is a heading, and this is a heading, and they're all
headings. Yeah.
But like, you want to think of only having a heading if there's going to be content underneath that someone could jump to. Right. And if it would make sense for them to jump to that. And then another thing about skipped heading levels, like we see it sometimes where there's no H2s, but they've done an H3 because it's like, well, it was smaller. I didn't like how my H2 was styled, or it's like a different font or a different color or something, right? But the problem is if a screen reader user hits H2 and they hear there are no H2s, they might not even bother to hit H3 because they'll just assume there are no headings on this page because you skipped the H2. So
I was going to say you should do just a single YouTube video of you doing this, but going through a reader, what that experience is like. And I know you said you're doing on a meetup and stuff, but just so as we can share with our clients, going, just watch this YouTube video. It's 5 minutes. This is what a person experiences looking at your web or at a website. Just because I don't think people get it. I don't people can vision it, or that's not the right word, but hear it, what those that need readers have to go through.
Yeah, I do actually have a video that I used for another talk. It's like a couple minutes, but it's trying to find a COVID vaccine in the state of Texas. It was for a community health workers summit.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, and there's so many accessibility problems. I have that. I'll literally throw the chat up if anybody.
Those websites are not accessible even for people who can see and hear.
Yeah, right.
Worse, they really are.
Let me tell you, like, I tried to get a vaccine in 4 different states, and so I got to go through this at least 16 different times because most states have more than one system. And my God, some of the worst websites I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll throw this link in the chat.
Williamson County COVID vaccine.
Oh, it's playing.
Skip to main content.
You probably can't hear it, I'm guessing.
Hear a little bit.
There you go. That's the link if anybody wants to see. And then there's actually a description, a little write-up down below of like what happened too.
Wow. Oh, and there's a transcript. I see what you're saying.
And a transcript.
Yeah.
Because, accessibility. So, yeah.
Oh, this is great, Amber. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? No?
Well, feel free to message me if you think of anything. Or, like I said, I hope someday everything will be accessible. So if I can be a resource, I'm happy to be a resource for anyone. And if you're really into like watching like demos of screen reader and how we test manually, our meetup on July 1st, it's Thursday, July 1st, and it's at 10 a.m. our time. I will be doing that, but I also will be recording that. So if you can't make it, if you go RSVP on the meetup page, I'll post the link there after the event. So you would get notified from meetup. I'm pretty sure, depending on your meetup settings, maybe not, but.
Well, guys, it's like 8:40. So we have
Sorry, I'm really long.
No, it's okay. It was really good. Ed, were you going to say something?
Yeah, just one other question. I copied the links out of your presentation. I put them in the chat for anybody who wants them. But also, like, you mentioned several great tools. Do you have a list of those links that you could share with us afterwards? Like all the browser plugins and extensions and all that stuff you mentioned?
Yeah, so those are all in the slides.
Oh, awesome.
The slides are linked, and I did put that up. It's equalizedigital.com/slides. It's in the chat as well. If you go to that, you can get the slides.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Well, we don't really have time for the one-on-ones that we usually do with the websites, but I'm hoping you guys come out for the networking coming up here next. So just save your questions for then, and the plan too is that these meetups will probably do every other month, the webinar and then webinar in person. Because there's some folks that really enjoy these Zoom calls because they're all the way up in the woodlands or where Conroe, way out in the middle of nowhere, and it's just too difficult to come in and in person. So we'll still do webinars. But Rick, were you going to say something? I know that you were trying to get into Black Sheep for the Houston one.
Well, I tried to contact, or I sent John a contact, but he never responded. So,
all right, I'll ping him. I'll see what he can say, see if we can get him to do something here. But
yeah, because I don't have any contact at Black Sheep.
okay. Well, all righty. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for everyone coming out. Appreciate you. Thanks so much, Amber. That was really great. Thank you.